All right. Well, good evening, everybody. This is Patrick from the Poison Pen Bookstore in Scottsdale, Arizona. And we're here today with Ashley Weaver. And she's going to be talking about the brand new book, One Final Turn. And as always, Ashley signed a batch of books for us. And we still have some of the signed copies. I'll put a link in the comments field if you'd like to purchase one of these. And if you have questions for Ashley, go ahead and type them in and Barbara will bring me on screen towards the end of the hour, and I'd be happy to ask any of your questions. Um, Barbara, I think that's it. Yeah, over to you.
Okay, thanks very
Thank
much,
you.
Patrick. Welcome, Ashley. I know
Thank
Ashley
you.
had a bit of trauma. She's now on her phone.
Yes, I'm on my phone, so but hopefully this is good. I feel like the top of
It's
my head is cut
it's
off, but
just fine. We've had a number of glitches, and I was embarrassed to say that after I sent out our e-news today and the book news and all, I realized that I had christened Ellie Electra McDonnell. So,
oh,
I know. So, it's just one of those days. I attribute it to the heat. Anyway, it actually is Electra McDonnell, not McDonald's like the hamburger. So I have that right now. And we are at the end of a series where Ashley and I believe we have talked about all of the books, haven't we?
I think so. I think we have.
Yep. Very good World War II. And there are so many women's stories about World War II, some of them real, some of them fictional. And Electra comes from a really interesting background that makes her useful in doing work for sort of like the special operations or whatever you want to call it. So since you invented her, why don't you describe Electra and her background for us, Ashley?
All right. Well, Electra comes from a family, I like to call them locksmiths by day, safecrackers by night. They are a family that's really adept at breaking into safes, at lock picking, all that kind of stuff. And so they have a legitimate business that they run. But then to make a little extra money, sometimes they'll perform special jobs at night. But so Electra's kind of grown up in this family of thieves. And so when she's recruited into the British war effort, she has all these skills to fall back on to help them in their efforts to fight the enemy.
And because she has been, a successful safecracker, whatever, she's pretty independent, which has led her to have some direct confrontations with her handler, Major Ramsey, who's much more by the book, and does not appreciate the fact that she can go off on her own. Although you'd think by now, in book five, would have learned. Yet her results are good going off
Right.
on her own, but that doesn't really matter. There's also a real class difference there, which you can't really overlook when writing British crime. And Electra's family is definitely um, lower middle class,
Mhm.
if that. And in fact, are they Irish? They're
The Irish, yes.
which makes
Or,
them even lower middle class for
right.
aristocratic Brits, because the Irish were not appreciated as immigrants into England. And Major Ramsey comes more from the aristocracy. So there are many points where they are going to collide. But anyway, I was sad to see that this was the final book in the series. That means that two or three of the story arcs that we have been discussing over the course of the books are inevitably going to come to an end. So the big question for those of you who've been reading the books is, will Electra and Major Ramsey get together or not? And we're not going to tell you.
You'll have to
You
wait and
need to
see.
read the book. That's right. Absolutely true. But the thing I mean, aside from the fact that I enjoy the characters and all the rest that Ashley does, is I have spent a lot of time in Lisbon. I have stayed at the Avenida
Oh,
Palace Hotel. I have been to Sintra. I have been all over. And so, as it happens, the mission in this book that Electra and the team, with a reluctant Major Ramsey along, all takes place in Lisbon. So tell us about tell us about that. Why are they going to Lisbon, and why did you decide they would go to Lisbon when you could have picked somewhere else?
sorry, my dogs are excited in the background. They hear visitors.
Of course
um,
they do.
one of I wanted to take okay, so Electra and her family, or Electra, it gets pulled into the Lisbon angle because she has a cousin who, since the first book, has been missing. He's a prisoner of war, or really, he's missing in action. She doesn't know exactly where he is. But in the fourth book, she gets information that he was a prisoner of war and he has escaped from his prison camp in France and is on the way back to neutral Lisbon via the Pyrenees. So Electra needs to go to Lisbon to try and make contact with her cousin and also to help get information on this escape route so that they can get more escaped prisoners through and get more information about what's going on behind enemy lines.
Isn't it interesting back in Napoleonic days when England was fighting France and the great powers were fighting France? A large swath of Napoleonic wars took place in Portugal. It's where Wellington actually became assumed command because he was in India as Sir Arthur Wellesley. And the I'm going by Cornwall, Bertram Cornwall, has written a whole series about a guy called Sharp. And much of the action in the Sharp series, again, takes place in Lisbon and the Pyrenees. So it's, Portugal and Switzerland were very useful.
Strategic places for sure.
Yeah. Well, not only that, but I mean, having a neutral place is actually very useful for both sides in a war. And I find it intriguing that, again, it was Portugal. It's pretty rough terrain. I mean, Portugal is it's a seafront. It has the Mediterranean coast, has the Atlantic coast, but there are a lot of mountains in Portugal, and it's rough country. So back before people were zooming around on tanks and drones and other stuff, they were like horses.
Horses and yeah.
It was a lot of work to get across the Pyrenees and get all the way to Lisbon. Lisbon's on the River Tagus, I think it is.
Yes.
So it's a major port. And the other port is up north called Porto, which is where the mouth of the Douro River comes in, which I have to tell you, just as an aside here, it's a really cool river cruise. I absolutely loved cruising the Douro. And because it's very short as compared to like the Danube or the Rhine or something, it's a round trip. You start in Porto and you go up the Douro and then you come
that sounds really
back.
fun.
But the good news is, even better news is that when you get to the end of the river, they dock and you have a day and they take you to Salamanca in Spain, which basically is sort of a Spanish version of Oxford. I mean, it's gorgeous. It has, ancient buildings and, vast student populations and all the rest of it. I'm just doing a travel log here because
I know, I'm so excited. I'm going to go look this up later.
Well,
I actually haven't been to Portugal yet, so now it's high on my list. And I'm going to get all the details from you.
It's an absolutely marvelous country. The only really difficulty with Portugal is that it's a very tough language. You can think, oh, well, I speak Spanish, so I'll be okay in Portuguese. No, you won't. It is of the Romance languages by far the most difficult. And I really admire people who decide they're going to go and settle there as Americans are fleeing, because overcoming the language, which is also spoken in Brazil, because Brazil was a major Portuguese colony, is a tough act as compared to learning Spanish or French or Italian, whatever.
Right. Yeah. Even the little bits of language that I put, in the book are a lot different than like you said, from Spanish or anything.
They really are.
Else.
Yeah. But anyway, it's a gorgeous country. It also has a wonderful cuisine. And I'm trying to remember, did you have the cream, the pastis, the famous Portuguese
I think so. I
think you did. It's like a croissant for Portuguese. And we once went to a restaurant in Lisbon where they had 36 different kinds. Oh, Lord.
Wow.
I know. I think I tried them all. Well, not all in one day. But anyway, it's like a Danish or whatever it is, except it has a cream filling, not a fruit filling and whatever. And the Portuguese are very big. I'm trying to remember, it's something like PASTEIS or something.
I think so.
Yeah, and wonderful. The other thing that the Portuguese do incredibly well, if you Portugal, I don't think that Electra and company had time to admire them, but the Portuguese are genius with tiles. And
yes.
Yep, and
I've seen a lot about that.
Yep, there is Azuelos tiles, which are blue and white, and is in Lisbon an incredible tile museum. that will take you. And they're the botanical garden in Madeira and in Lisbon. You didn't want to hear all this, but I'm
No,
doing
I
it
love
anyway.
it.
Are absolutely magnificent because of the tiles. So I felt it was sad that Electra was there to rescue her
I
from
know.
missing,
She's supposed to enjoy.
instead of
I tried
enjoying
to throw in as much
justice.
sightseeing as possible, but
I know. But anyway,
like,
one
look
could
at that.
hope that perhaps if she survives after the war, um, and no telling here how this will
Yeah.
go, maybe, maybe she could make a return trip to Lisbon at some point and try out some of these things.
Yes, have a little bit.
Maybe
I
if you
think I
look,
put she saw like she noticed the tiles from like a cab window,
yeah,
and there's a couple
exactly.
like things I tried to fit in, that were important to the culture. Like she went to a is it Fado
Yeah,
the music,
Fado.
yeah,
Yeah.
and so she got to go to a show, and experience that. So a couple things I tried to fit into the story just of the culture and whatnot.
You
But
did really well. Yeah.
thank you.
Fado for Portuguese is like, the Spanish, I'm going blank. What do we call it? The Spanish dancing thing.
Flamenco.
Yeah, thank you. It's like flamingo, although flamingo doesn't often sing, whereas Fado is important. Fado singers is kind of like Edith Piaf, if she could actually speak Portuguese.
Yeah.
The Fado, they're quite mournful and whatever. But you have to remember that Portugal was the first European country that actually sailed down the coast of Africa and around east, established a colony in India, went all the way to the Spice Islands. They were really terrific seafarers, ahead of the Spanish, certainly ahead of the British. So, they're tough country, tough people.
Right.
Anyway, so what happens when Electra gets what? More intelligence that she's back in London with her locksmith uncle, and then an assignment comes her way, which is what?
Yes, she thinks that her cousin has escaped from POW camp, and so she's going to go try and rescue him. And then also, she's working with British intelligence so that they can get information on this escape route, so they can find out better information on how uh, POWs are escaping, how they can help them escape, and then get more information about what's going on in occupied Europe. So she heads off to Portugal to do that, and then of course there's the sort of uh, fallout from her last mission. She's got a little bit of a she's moved on to a different handler in this book, and so she and Major Ramsey are sort of estranged, for lack of a better word. But he's in on the mission too, of course, and so there's a little bit of tension there, and so she's got to deal with her personal issues as well as her personal relationship to the war, which is her cousin is there, and then she's also just trying to look at the overall big picture and help in any way she can.
If I remember right, Major Ramsey actually fired her or
Yes.
dismissed her from the team, which I think because she had done something, it was like one step too far for him
Mm-hmm.
in book four. So, yeah.
Yeah, so she didn't take that extremely well. Uh, she felt like well, especially because they had kind of started forming a little bit of a romantic relationship there too. And so then when he fired her, kind of put an end to that element as well. And so she's got a lot of mixed feelings, and her emotions are involved, and she's trying to focus and do a good job while also trying to deal with the way all of this has affected her personally.
That's very true. So she's going looking for her cousin Toby, who may or may not be coming across the pyramids on this escape route. And she has a travel companion, the charming Captain Archie Blandings. But
Yes.
here's the thing, there was no really safe way to go to Portugal. If you went by sea, you were possibly going to be run into U-boats. And if you went by air, I mean, airplanes, although currently there are a lot of airplanes falling out of the sky,
Right.
but airplanes were not necessarily safe, but the Luftwaffe was up there. And so either way was a really
It's a little
dangerous
bit of,
trip.
yeah, just risk inherent in the travel itself.
Oh yeah,
For sure.
tremendous risk inherent, and also risk, even if they establish an escape route to get British soldiers to Lisbon, they still have to get them back to England. And
Mm-hmm.
so it's going to be the same problem there is, do they put them on boats and subject them to that, or do they try to fly them back? And well, so you have to take an optimistic view writing the book, right?
Right. Yes, exactly. Actually, I didn't realize I guess I had never read into it that much, but the old movie actor Leslie Howard, who died in a plane crash, it was actually a plane crash from Lisbon, which I didn't realize.
Yes, it
His
was.
plane was leaving from Lisbon, and I guess I never really paid attention to where it was at that plane. But that was a movie star who got killed on a plane crash on a plane because of you know decided to bomb it. So yeah, it was dangerous for sure.
That was absolutely dangerous. Glenn Miller was killed doing that. The oldest Kennedy boy, not JFK, but his older brother. There were all kinds of people who died, not fighting, but in the air, so to speak,
Mhm.
for one reason or another. Sometimes from enemy action, and sometimes, as I said, planes just fell down. Um, Women, as I was talking to somebody the other day that I'm trying to remember who, that said while women were not allowed to join the RAF, they were ground support and so forth, but they didn't actually fly, that it was determined or has been determined that women were probably better pilots in part because they were more willing to take instruction
Yeah.
rather than just, I'm serious. I'm trying
Yeah.
to think, it was David Lewis the other day who had that, conversation. And I've thought about that we don't really hear about women as pilots, but
Hmm.
but they certainly could have been. Anyway, what is Ellie's role? Why are they sending her? Is it because she's the one who would recognize Toby?
Well,
Or
they're sending her, well, because they figure Toby and whoever he's traveling with, will have information, and she's going to be someone that they know Toby will trust, obviously, to make that connection with him, and help. He'll be able to give her information about the escape route and stuff like that, and she'll be able to recognize Toby, and she'll know kind of, hopefully, they don't know exactly when or where he's going to turn up, but she knows how he thinks, and where he might go and what he might do, so she has kind of an inside knowledge on that.
well, I mean, we should add that there are loads of double agents in Lisbon. Um, Yeah, no, there have been some great war books. What's his name? Robert Wilson Patrick was called A Night in Lisbon, I think, something like that. But
Yes,
anyway,
I've seen that one. I haven't read it yet, but it's on my
oh,
list.
it's an absolutely brilliant book. And of course, it's historical fiction. So even though it was written forever ago, it hasn't actually aged.
Yeah.
It's still relevant. But because there were so many double agents and all the rest of it, it was important that Toby see his cousin and,
Right, somebody
their
he knows.
information. Yeah, because some guy he's never seen before or woman he's never seen before might not actually be a trustworthy person.
Yes, he might be
So,
much more wary. And then, even though Lisbon was neutral, there were enemy, both sides were operating in, to a large extent, under agents and this and that. So, even once you get to Lisbon, you're not necessarily safe, because there are a lot of, like, even like members of the Gestapo and things like that that were in Lisbon, and you have to be careful you're not recaptured by the wrong people.
oh, absolutely true. And of course, everybody tended to stay in the same place. So the Avenida Palace or Plaza, whichever it was, Palace, I think, was at that time, and certainly the first time I went to Lisbon 20 years ago, was like the posh hotel.
Mhm.
It's a beautiful hotel. I think the last time I was there, they had refurbished it.
Okay.
Hard to remember. But originally, when Rob and I went, actually, because Bernard Cornwell had said to me when he was here that he had been at a cruise company, a little cruise company had advertised that he would be sailing from Barcelona to Lisbon, which was really news to him. He was not planning on going on this trip, but now he wondered what he should do. So we kind of came to an agreement that if we went, he would go. Anyway, so it must have been around 2000, something like that.
Okay.
Anyway, the Avenida Palace was still not updated, but lovely. I mean, beautiful high ceilings, great stuff, great location, very central. And so it would have been the obvious place for all these agents and so forth to gather. It's also surrounded, it's kind of got a square around it, surrounded by little restaurants and cafes. There's a whole, outdoor eating like Paris.
Right.
So the weather in Lisbon is better than in England.
Yeah.
Right.
For sure.
Yep.
She makes
So
note of Ellie makes note of that as well.
yeah. So anyway, it would be a place. So Ellie and Major Ramsey and Archie are all, if I remember right, well, at least Ellie is staying at the Avenida Palace,
Yes.
and Major Ramsey, by some curious chance, ends up staying in an adjoining room.
Yes. Because I went ahead and made Archie to where his his people he works with, they keep a couple rooms sort of set aside for people that he brings in to help with different things. So that worked out conveniently.
Well, you had a very nice review, one of several reviews, but one of which I thought was really true. Um, well, I'm sorry, not really true. They're all true, but better than the rest. Weaver tests her heroine's mettle with a series of increasingly complex challenges, compounded by Ellie's worry for her cousin and the strain of being far from home. A nail-biting confrontation at an ancient fortress. Well, there we go. Was that in Sintra? Is that where they headed, or was it somewhere further out from Lisbon? I can't
Yeah, it was
remember.
somewhere farther out. They do the plane when they first get in, they land in Centra actually, and then uh, go to Portugal. I mean, go to Lisbon from there. But the sort of climax takes place, and it's like sort of a. It's not a real place. It was a not to give too much away, but it's a location that I just kind of made up. But it's sort of in between. It's nearer the Spanish border than it is closer to Lisbon. So that well, I don't want. I'm trying to think of what I can say without giving too much away. But
Oh,
yeah,
no, you don't need to say.
that's an imaginary location.
No, you don't. Well, I mean, Lisbon is because it has two sea coasts, the Mediterranean coast and then the Atlantic coast. Sintra is kind of where the bend is, if I remember right. If you go west from Lisbon, and that's where the country turns up north, and Sintra. Sintra is where the royal palaces were. I mean, it's actually a really cool place to go because there's some gorgeous things to look at
Yes,
over
I've
there.
seen the beautiful
Yeah, really
architecture and
beautiful.
stuff.
So Lisbon itself is on the Mediterranean. And in fact, if you read the book by it's not Ben Kingsley, he's the actor. But anyway,
Is it McLeod or something like that? Maybe.
Patrick will tell us in a minute because he,
Okay.
he always tends to know. I can't remember it. But when the British came up with this idea of dressing up a corpse and
Uh-huh.
giving false papers, and
Operation Mincemeat.
that was it. Ben McIntyre, his name is. There we go.
Oh yeah, he's one of my favorites.
Right. But anyway, they launched it from Lisbon because, it would float in the right direction.
Right. And they knew that
Yeah,
that I think they wanted it to float to Spain because they knew that there were Germans there that would find it.
right. Yeah, because Spain was a fascist country, and while theoretically neutral, was definitely in the Hitler camp, not the
Right.
Allied camp. Yeah. Anyway, so Sintra is a very cool place, and I'll add it to my travel log should you go to Portugal. You
Definitely.
really want to go to Sintra because, it's kind of like going to Versailles, except there's more than one palace there. It's really neat. Okay, well, I don't know what else we can say without spoiling the book.
I know there's a little bit of the danger of spoiling things, but it is sort of just like we're talking about the neutral place. So you've got enemy agents from everywhere, and there's double agents and sometimes triple agents, and there's Electra and her cohorts come across more than one body, and the stakes are high, and for her personally, and stakes are high for the war effort, and so it's just a lot of exciting things happening in a glamorous location.
You had a wonderful time writing it, didn't you?
I did. I had so much fun.
I could
I really
tell. I
did.
mean, it comes across that way. You can always tell, well, not always, but generally you can tell if an author is really enjoying writing a book because there's a sort of joie de vivre in
Yeah.
the prose and all the rest of it. So, we're coming to the end of the series, and you had written an earlier series. What is it you're thinking now about doing? Are you going to try to write something else or take a
Oh,
break?
I don't know. I just at this moment, nothing definite. I've got a few ideas floating around, so I'm kind of trying to decide on something. So hopefully I'll get started on something new soon, but I don't have anything definite in the works yet.
So your bent is towards historical fiction, you know.
I do enjoy, I read a lot of historical, and I just kind of I gravitate towards it in general, I think, because especially when I'm writing, because I always feel like writing is sort of a little bit of escapism. You know, as a writer, it's fun to go to a different place in a different time. And so for me personally, when I write stuff that's set now, it's not as exciting. Never
I
say
mean,
never, but that's what I enjoy.
well, I mean, I think at the moment we're seeing literature kind of dividing into two camps. Part of it's merging towards cozy with a big push towards historical, and then part of it is moving very dark. It's
Hmm.
moving, gothic-y and horror has made a giant comeback. And I think that these sort of reflect two worldviews at the moment. One is that you just want to escape from the mess that we're in. And you can do it by going dark, or you can do it by comfort reading.
Right.
And I find myself when I'm selecting books to recommend to our customers and so forth that I'm skewing towards comfort reading and historical. I am not skewing dark. Um, but there's a huge thing about it. Lots of violence, lots of women serial killers and
Yeah. Yeah, I
horrific
have been
stuff.
seeing a lot more women serial killers
Oh
lately.
yeah, yeah. There's a lot about, empowering women in various ways that can be horrific. There's also a whole thing about podcasting and citizen crime solving,
Hmm.
because the technology that we have today allows more people to witness things and
Right.
record things. In fact, if you're any kind of celebrity, you have to be totally careful at all times because, there's somebody with a camera
And
ready to
I
get
think,
you. So historical fiction is a lot easier in
right.
many respects. You don't have to deal with all that. And but on the other hand, then you have to do research into the time to make it reasonably accurate. So are you a person who really enjoys doing research?
Well, I do. I'm a librarian, so it kind of comes naturally to me. I like looking into all the little details. I'm actually the sort of person who, whenever I'm reading anything, if I come across something that I want to learn a little bit more about, I'll take a break from the book and go read up on it real quick. So I naturally like to look things up and learn new things, and so that's an enjoyable part of writing the stories for me.
I think
I
it's an enjoyable part for readers too, to learn little nuggets of things that you might not have known. I'm also very fond of maps in historical fiction because I think, the world's changed and
Mhm.
oftentimes geography is a real component of plot when you're, dealing with issues in the past. Well, it certainly is today too, I mean,
Right.
geography is a huge thing, where do you draw lines and on and on and on. So I think that's fun. Well, I'm sure you'll come up with something
I'm
because,
sure. My
writers
mind's
write.
always going, so we'll see what happens next. But um yeah, I do enjoy, just thinking about what you said about the technology and stuff. I do think that's such an interesting element for modern mysteries, is where, like you said, it'll be podcasters or like taking those modern elements and working them in. And so I do like a modern thriller I've read a couple like podcasters solve mysteries types of books, and I've enjoyed those too. So I do think that is kind of fun how they work modern technology into it. I like to have my people working without cell phones. That's what I always say. If I can get them to
Well,
work, do their work without cell phones.
sure. It's not just cell phones, it's GPS tracking and,
Yeah, and
DNA,
yeah,
DNA
camera footage
evidence.
and
Yeah.
yeah,
Yeah, there's a lot of science now that, it used to be back in the, Poirot in the golden age that it
yeah,
was more
looking
about,
for footprints and things like
well,
that.
but it was more about character. It
Hmm.
was more about drilling down through character to find motives. And,
Right.
I think that because technology as, forensics and all the rest of it have greatly increased in crime solving that now, the intuitive often has to give way to the scientific.
And some people do it really well. So it is fun to see that element of it in some ways. But
I agree entirely. And I enjoy writers who, figure out ways to kind of disrupt it all.
hmm
Sending people, I mean, the island mystery has really made a comeback. And part of it is because if you put people in some remote location like an island, then a lot of the technology is, foiled.
Yeah.
So, I'm waiting for one that takes place on the top of Everest or something. It's
Right.
harder to find a place in the world anymore that is out of contact or where, you can truly be alone.
Or you won't be caught on camera, or you won't, something like that. So that's true.
Very true. Well, Patrick, come and join us and tell us if we have any questions or if anybody wants more information about traveling to Lisbon.
Um, let's see. Actually, this question just came in. Ashley said she's thinking about some different ideas for new books. Will they be set in the same time period as her other series or something totally different? Anything percolating?
I don't have a definite answer right now. I probably won't do. I would say probably not, at least not right away, another World War II era. Um, my first series was set in the 30s, and then this one, of course, was set in the 40s. So we'll see. Maybe I'll go up or down 50s or 20s. We'll see.
Yeah.
The 1920s are really a very, very rich time
Yes,
between the
definitely.
wars. So, you might really have fun with that, or you could jump ahead to the 50s or historical fiction really now starts about 1970. So you have
Hmm.
more decades to work,
Yep.
more decades to work with than you
the
did
the very
earlier.
first book I wrote it starting my freshman year of high school, and it was set in 1920 Chicago, and it was kind of like it was about like gangsters, and there was a mystery and there was a romance in it. And so I'm always kind of thinking fondly of the 1920s, because that was sort of my first go at historical fiction was set in the 1920s.
Excellent.
Did Electra kind of arise out of research you did, or did you have this character that she just start speaking to you?
Actually speaking, I can't remember if I've talked about this before, but the actually talking about Ben McIntyre, I had read a Ben McIntyre book called Agent Zigzag about a man who was a petty criminal who became a double agent for the British during World War II.
Hmm.
And so there was just sort of a line in that book about how different, I think, criminals could kind of like use their abilities for the war effort. And then this guy was, I think he may have done some, I can't remember if he did safe cracking or not, but he was this criminal, and he was imprisoned on the Channel Islands, which were occupied by the Germans. And so they took him out of jail and said, "We'll train you to be a double agent and you can get out of jail." So he said, "Okay." And they took him to England and trained him, parachuted him back into England. And then he went right away to the authorities and said, "The Germans think I'm a spy for them. Do you want me to spy for you?" And so he became this double agent. And I was just fascinated by how all the little things that made him sort of, an undesirable member of society before the war really came in handy during the war. So that's kind of where the idea took off.
Well, that is so true that, regular people doing regular jobs and all are just not really prepared in
Right.
many respects. We were, I've read that one reason the draft worked in World War II is that so many of the young men were farm workers or factory workers, so they were strong. They
Mhm.
were engaged in physical labor. And I try to envision what it would be like to draft, all the guys living in their basements with keyboards and all. I mean,
Yeah.
they would be in terrible shape.
Yep. It's true. That is something really interesting to think about, because I read a while back, I read Band of Brothers, and just talking about, their training and all that. But I think you're right. They're definitely went into it a little bit more in shape than a lot of people now today would be.
Absolutely.
They'd be sending drones out from their basement or something like that.
Well,
Yeah.
warfare has become a lot more technological rather than, physical, and it's skewing technological. So you're
Hmm.
right. It can be that the guy, that was playing video games in his basement would be more
Is
useful
ideally
to the
suited
war
to.
effort
Yeah.
than some guy who was out on the shooting range.
Right. Just like the
Um,
mysteries, you have to work around the technology nowadays. It's not old fashioned like it used to be.
right. Let's see. The question, does Ashley know how to pick locks or
I
safe crack?
do not. At the very beginning, when I first started writing the series, I ordered a safe crack, not a safe cracking, a lock picking kit online, and I wanted to learn how to use it. And then when I did, book signings and things, I could demonstrate my cool lockpicking skills, but it never panned out. Harder than it seems. So no, I can't do that, and I definitely don't think I could crack a safe for sure. That was a lot of research I did into how to do that, but I wouldn't be able to tell you how to really do it
How
because
to
it's
really do it.
Electronic,
complicated.
locks are so electronic today that it's a different skill set now.
Hmm. Yep, that's true. Well,
I
and
like
then
those.
oh, I'm
Go
sorry, go
ahead.
ahead.
I was just going to say I like those late 60s, early 70s British heist movies where they assemble this cast of
Yeah.
eccentric characters who all have their own specialized thing, you know.
Yeah, I love stuff like that. Yeah, and actually safe cracking is a lot more mathematical than I realized too when I first started out. There's a lot of sort of a formula that you have to work out, and I'm not a math person, so I definitely don't think I'd be cut out for that.
Here's an interesting one from our friend Stefania from Italy. She says, I would like to know from Ms. Weaver if she keeps the first drafts of her books. Does it help when writing the new ones?
The first drafts. I don't really write my book in order. I I write big chunks of it and then I kind of rearrange it sort of. So sometimes I will have a document that has like all my original chunks in it, but then I like open a clean document and start putting it in kind of in order and filling out in between the different scenes. And so I don't usually have just a just a straight first draft that I've sat down and written from beginning to end. It's kind of all sort of meshed together. But I do
Right.
keep. I don't ever get rid of anything. If I write a scene or a something like that I don't use. There's been a couple times where I've written a scene for one book that didn't make it into a book, and then I ended up putting it in another book. So I definitely keep everything just in
Wow.
case.
Let's see here. Here's a simple one. When does Ashley find time to write?
I'm a night owl, so I write in the evenings. I worked in public libraries for years and years, and just this past year I started as a school librarian. So I'm currently having my first summer off since I was in
Nice.
school. Yeah. So that's going to afford me some more time to write for sure. But normally I write, I'm a, an evening person. So I'll write after dinner in the evenings.
Um, there were a number of questions. Everybody's curious about your dogs. They'd like to see your dogs. Are they
The,
chomping at the bit?
I have them put away right now. They're kind of bad.
Okay.
They won't, I have two, I guess they're, mixed breed dogs. One I got from a former coworker whose dog had puppies, and he's like a big black lab mix. And then the other one, I'm not sure what she is. She turned up outside, actually, the same coworker's mother's house, and her ribs were showing, and she was a little stray. So I said I would keep her. And so she's smaller, but she's they're a handful when I'm trying to
I'm
conduct
sure.
business,
Sure they are.
but they're good dogs.
Oh, here's this Stefania says Ashley looks like an Italian singer. Her name is Chiara. They're very similar.
Oh, I
Have
don't
you
know
heard of
Kiara. I'll have to
Chiara?
look it up. I don't know. I'm gonna look
Yeah.
her up later though.
People are also curious about the interesting assembly of art behind you.
Yes, the
Can you
eye in
Oh, this
particular.
is just my just various things I picked up here and there. I like color and that kind of thing. And yeah, the eye I saw somewhere, and it's I don't know if you can tell, but it's a little mirror in
Oh, is
the
Yeah.
that what it is?
in the
No.
mirror. So
Okay.
I was like, oh, that's fun. So anyway, I just kind of assembled a what do they call it, a collage wall or something like that.
Yeah.
I think, let me see. I think that's about it.
All right.
Yeah. Barbara?
Thanks for
Um,
the questions, everyone.
well, it was great. Thank you all for engaging. And as Patrick said, we do have signed copies, but not a whole lot of them left. And we
Yeah.
appreciate Ashley being so kind as to sign them. Maybe if she does something new, we can lure her to Scottsdale for an
Oh,
event, which would
I
be
love
great. But
it.
anyway, one final turn. And actually, I think, although I should check, are the first four available in paperback still?
Yes, the first four.
I think
The
they
fourth
are.
one just came out in paperback.
Right. So if you haven't read them all and you're watching this, just by chance or somebody recommended it or something, you could, it's only 5 books, you could just like binge the whole series, which I'm recommending with summer coming up and a long 4th of July weekend. It's a great time to figure out a series and work your way right through one. So this is one you could certainly enjoy. Thanks,
Yes.
Ashley. It was great to be with you.
Thank
And
you. It's a
good night,
pleasure talking to you
everybody.
as always.
Thank
And
you.
I'm
Thanks
looking
for
forward now to
joining
my
us.
trip to Lisbon. I'll have to get with you for some information.
You bet. I'd be happy to supply it. It's one of my
Okay.
favorite countries, right?